Celia Alcott, student and women's lib activist at Fulchester University, was convicted in March of having stolen an antique vase from the quarters of her tutor, Martin Archer, and sentenced to 6 months in prison. At her trial, damning evidence was given by Professor Archer and also from his wife, Winifred, even though the vase had not been found in Celia's possession. For her part, Winifred Archer testified that the vase had been in its accustomed position just before a tutorial Celia had had with her husband on the day of the theft and missing afterwards. Barely 3 weeks after Celia Alcott had been committed to prison, however, the vase came to light in an auction sale at Market Storley, a town 20 miles from Fulchester. And today in the Crown Court, it is Winifred Archer who stands trial. She is accused of perjury and of conspiring to pervert the course of justice.
So, Mr. Lloyd, the position is that Celia Alcott's conviction was quashed by the Court of Criminal Division on the grounds that the trial judge had misdirected the jury.
Yes, my lord, that's correct.
And the Court of Appeal were not asked to consider any fresh evidence.
No, my lord. Miss Alcott was freed by the Court of Appeal on a technicality, one might say.
And this prosecution, you say, is not brought by the police. It is a private prosecution?
Yes, my lord.
Well, hadn't the jury better know who is bringing it?
Oh, well, if your lordship thinks so, it is being brought by the Students' Union at Fulchester University.
The Students' Union? Bringing a charge that one of their own lecturers and his wife deliberately framed a student so that she was convicted and went to prison?
Yes, my lord, just that.
Oh, well, call your evidence.
Thank you, my lord. I call Detective Sergeant Halliday.
Detective Sergeant Halliday, please.
I swear by Almighty God, the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You're Detective Sergeant Alexander Halliday of the Fulchester CID.
I am.
In a case in March 1973 in which Celia Alcott, a student at Fulchester University, was convicted of theft, did you give evidence as the arresting officer?
I did.
Will you tell the court how you first became involved in this case, please?
Very well, sir. On December the 4th last, I was asked to go to the campus quarters of Professor Martin Archer, lecturer in history at Fulchester University, to investigate the disappearance of an antique vase. Well, the professor's wife, Mrs. Winifred Archer, told me that the vase was normally kept on a stand by the French windows in the professor's study, and that it had definitely been there before a student called Celia Alcott had arrived for her tutorial with the professor at 3 p.m., and that it was found to be gone at 5 p.m. That was just 30 minutes after Miss Alcott's departure. Nobody else had called, and the professor confirmed that Miss Alcott arrived and departed by means of the French windows.
I see. So what did you do, Sergeant?
Well, naturally, sir, I went to interview Miss Alcott. Now, the young lady lived on the campus on the second floor of Denver College, accommodation block. She denied stealing the vase, in fact, any knowledge of it whatever. So I got a warrant and I searched her room. But the vase didn't come to light. Well, then 2 days later,
Yes, Sergeant?
Well, I think I should say here, sir, the fact of the matter was I wasn't altogether happy with Miss Alcott generally. But she was belligerent. She seemed to be laughing at me in an odd sort of way, sir, as though she were having a go, if the phrase is permissible, my lord. So I kept watch on her. And on December the 6th at 1:45 p.m., I observed Miss Alcott go into a bank and make a cash deposit, which on investigation turned out to be for £150, which was just about the resale value of the missing vase on the open market.
You confronted Miss Alcott with this intelligence, did you?
Yes, sir, I saw her the same evening. Now, I told her I knew she had no income apart from a student grant. But she evaded my questions for a while, and then, well, finally she told me that she'd received the money as a gift from Professor Archer.
As a gift?
Yes, sir.
From Professor Archer?
That's right. It seems that she was deeply involved in what is called the Women's Liberation Movement. And she reckoned that he was sympathetic too, and as a consequence, he'd given her the £150.
Well, you'd obviously checked this story out with Professor Archer. What did he say?
He said it was a load of old cobblers, sir. A lot of old nonsense, my lord.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Yes, he denied he had any sympathy whatever with the Women's Liberation Movement. In fact, he stated categorically that he'd never given Celia Alcott any money. Well, his wife was able to support him in this. She produced bank statements going back over the past 9 months, and there were no cash withdrawals of £150 at any time.
So you then proceeded to the arrest of Celia Alcott, did you?
Forthwith, sir.
Now, did Miss Alcott at any time admit to you the theft of that vase?
No, sir, no. She stuck to her story throughout the whole affair, even in court. Although the jury were only out half an hour before returning a guilty verdict.
And both Archer and his wife gave evidence against Miss Alcott, which resulted in her conviction.
Yes, sir, particularly that he'd never given her any money as she claimed.
Now, did Miss Alcott's conviction and sentence end the matter for you, Sergeant?
Well, no, sir, no. You see, there was still the matter of the missing vase, sir. And it was on our lists, and in fact, in early April it turned up at an auction sale in Market Storley, that's west of Fulchester, sir. The vase had belonged to an old gentleman called Mr. Randall, who just died, and whose effects were being sold up. And we discovered that he'd bought the vase in mid-December from an antique shop in the town. The proprietor was a Mr. Victor Purbright.
Now, did you visit Mr. Purbright and question him as to how he'd come by the vase, Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
And what did he say?
No, Mr.
My lord, my learned friend is anxious that this question is asked. He has no objection.
Yes, sir, Mr. Logan?
It is, my lord.
Very well, Sergeant, you may answer the question.
Well, as it happened, Mr. Purbright remembered the vase very well, sir. He said that on December the 5th previous, a woman had approached him offering to sell him the vase. Well, he recognized it at once, sir, as being a good example of early Byzantine pottery. So he offered her £150 for it, and this she accepted.
Now, December the 5th, that's the day after the vase went missing from Professor Archer's university quarters.
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Purbright say whether he recognized the woman, Sergeant?
Well, he said he'd never seen her before, if that's what you mean, sir.
Could he describe her, Sergeant?
Yes, sir. Yes, he could, sir. He said that she was a middle-aged woman with ash-blonde hair, sir.
Middle-aged, ash-blonde hair.
Yes.
Not young, dark.
No?
Not at all like Celia Alcott, then?
No.
Who'd already been convicted and sent to prison for the offence. But like someone else in the case?
Well, no, I wouldn't know.
Mr. Lloyd, that is a question for the jury, not for the sergeant.
Very well. The fact is that notwithstanding Mr. Purbright's evidence, you did not instigate this prosecution.
No, sir, that is correct. We did not.
And the Students' Union came forward and they represented to you that the evidence established that the woman who'd sold the vase was not Celia Alcott.
Yes, sir, that is so.
So what did you do?
Well, sir, the woman who'd sold Mr. Purbright the vase had left her name and address, sir, which was Kate Greer of 20 Brabham Road, Fulchester. Well, there turned out to be no such address and no such woman as far as we could discover. Well, I also interviewed Mrs. Archer, who denied selling her own vase or even that she'd been in Market Storley on December the 5th. Well, then while we were trying to make up our minds how best to proceed, sir, I had another request to go to the Archer's quarters on the university campus.
Yes, before that happened, had you seen Martin Archer about the new evidence?
Well, yes, I had told him about it, sir, yes.
Did he seem interested?
Well, he seemed very, very agitated, sir. He asked a lot of questions, some of them several times over.
And how long was it between that interview and your next visit to the Archers?
2 days.
And why did you go to the house again?
To investigate a death, sir.
A death?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you tell us about it, please?
Yes, sir. Well, a call came from Mrs. Archer on April the 20th last. She said she came downstairs and discovered her husband sprawled over his desk in the study. He'd been working late the night before, and beside him was a bottle which had contained sleeping pills. He was dead.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Mr. Logan?
Sergeant Halliday, I suppose you made the usual inquiries into Professor Archer's death. What did you find?
Well, there was no note or anything like that, sir. The inquest was held a week later, and death was ascribed to a massive overdose of barbiturates. The coroner returned a verdict of suicide.
Now, when you first saw Victor Purbright, he simply told you that the woman who'd sold him the vase was middle-aged with ash-blonde hair and that she'd given her name as Kate Greer and that she lived at Brabham Road, which doesn't exist. He told you nothing more.
No, that was all.
And then about a week later, the Students' Union told you that they had established a definite identification between the woman in his shop and the lady who is now on trial, Mrs. Archer.
Yes, sir.
Did they or Mr. Purbright tell you how they'd done this?
Well, they both said the same thing, sir, that the leaders of the Students' Union had gone to Mr. Purbright and they'd showed him a photograph of Mrs. Archer, and he claimed he recognized her.
Sergeant, surely the normal police method is to show the witness a whole book of photographs, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we consider it dangerous to show a witness a photograph and say, is this the man or is this the woman? Well, we consider it safer to show the witness a whole sheaf of photographs to choose from. I mean, otherwise you suggest too much to the witness. It's a matter of psychology.
Quite. That is the whole purpose of an identity parade, isn't it?
Yes, my lord.
Carry on, Mr. Lakeman.
Well, you rejected the suggested identification as unreliable, then, you're telling us, Sergeant.
Well, it struck us that it might not have been made under the most desirable conditions. Yes, sir.
Sergeant Halliday, I want to ask you a more speculative question now. Do you really believe there actually was a middle-aged woman with ash-blonde hair who sold the vase to Mr. Pirbright?
I beg your pardon, sir?
Well, she gave her name as Kate Greer, you tell us. Are you acquainted with the name Kate Millett, Sergeant?
Kate Millett? No, I don't think so, sir, no.
Or Germaine Greer?
Just a minute, sir. They're,
Ladies famous for their activities in the sphere of women's lib, Sergeant. Exactly. Now, Kate Greer is an amalgam of the two, it would seem. And she lived at 20 Brabham Road. Yes, how do you spell that, I wonder?
Spell it, sir?
Yes.
B-R-A-B-U-R-N. But there's no such road, sir.
No, perhaps not, but the name here might well be a simple inversion of the two words burn and bra, mightn't they? Burning the bra, Sergeant, an activity much favoured by certain extremists of the women's liberation movement, or so we're led to believe. We seem to be confronted with something of a joke here, don't we, Sergeant? An in-joke. You might almost say a student prank. Now, would that be the behaviour of a settled, mature woman like the accused? Or of someone quite different?
Victor Pirbright, please. Come this way, sir.
What is your religion, please?
Well, I was brought up Church of England.
Take the testament in your right hand and read aloud the words on this card.
You are Victor Pirbright, antique dealer of 42 the Butterwalk, Market Stawley.
That's right. It's my shop. I live above it. It's very...
Yes, I see. Now, Mr. Pirbright, I want you to look at an object that we have here and see if you recognise it.
Just hold on to me. Yes. Yes, this is a vase I purchased for £150 from a woman who brought it to my shop on December the 5th last. It's a decent example of a middle period Byzantine vase, probably from Thessaloniki, or it might be from Cyprus. Anyway, because of its condition, I paid £150 for it. I sold it on December the 12th to a Mr. Randall, a client of mine who had a collection of similar stuff. He's since dead, I'm sorry to say.
Yes, I see. Right, yes, thank you, Mr. Pirbright. The vase should be marked Exhibit 1.
Thank you, sir.
Now, did you ask this lady for her name when she sold you the vase, Mr. Pirbright?
Oh, yes, we have to do that. Well, she called herself Kate Greer of 20 Brabham Road, Fulchester.
And did you pay her for the purchase by cheque or in cash?
Oh, in cash. Most of our business is done by cash. Well, I mean, you've got to be ready to pay up there and then if you want to get the good stuff.
Now, how long did your business with this lady, Kate Greer, as she called herself, take?
How long? Well, about 20 minutes, I suppose.
20 minutes?
Yes. You see, it didn't take me long to realise that the vase she was offering me was the genuine article, so then it was just a question of the price. Well, I said £150 and, well, she agreed without hesitation.
Without hesitation?
Yes.
Well, is that usual, Mr. Pirbright?
I'm sorry.
I think what Mr. Lloyd is anxious to establish, Mr. Pirbright, is whether or not you observed signs of haste, of impatience to settle matters in the woman calling herself Kate Greer who sold you the vase.
Oh, I see. Ah.
Yes, well, did you?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes. She did seem to be in rather a race to get the business finished, now I come to think of it. I was a bit surprised. People generally like to stay for a chat, look at the other goods, that sort of thing.
Yes, I see. Thank you, Mr. Pirbright.
Now, can you tell me this? Did you give the police a description of the lady who came into your shop on December the 5th and sold you the vase?
Oh, yes, I did.
Well, what was the description, please?
Well, I said she was a middle-aged woman with fair greying hair, a sort of ashy blonde it was.
Now, could you recognise this same lady if you saw her again?
Oh, yes, no question of that.
Do you see her in court today?
Yes, it's that woman there, the accused, Winifred Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pirbright.
Mr. Pirbright, you tell us that Miss Greer, whom you now identify as having been, in fact, Mrs. Archer, was in your shop on December the 5th for some 20 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, about 20 minutes.
About? Does that mean more or less?
Oh, possibly more, possibly less.
No, I'm afraid that won't quite do, Mr. Pirbright. I would like to be assured as to the exact length of time that she was there.
Well, that's rather a tall order when you come to think of it. Well, less rather than more, shall we say.
Well, the transaction occupied 20 minutes at the outside. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
It's not very long, Mr. Pirbright. Not very long to get a good look at a person, the sort of look that would justify a positive identification of her some 4 months after the event, anyway.
Well, 20 minutes is plenty of time to have a good look at a person.
Well, is it? Oh, very well. Then let's put the whole encounter to the test. First of all, the physical conditions.
Look, I'm not going to discuss
the physical
lady's
conditions,
physical
Mr. Pirbright, what it was like in your shop when the lady called and sold you the vase. What time of day was it? Can you remember?
Yes, well, I think it was about 11 o'clock in the morning.
I see. And the weather?
Good heavens, you don't expect me to remember that? Who could?
Well, if I were to tell you that snow fell at about midday on the 5th, would that refresh your memory?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right, snow did fall. It had been threatening all the morning.
There's not much light in the sky then, and inside... would you describe your shop as a lightsome place, Mr. Pirbright?
Lightsome place? Well, there's plenty of light, if that's what you mean.
Yes, I'll have to admit as to only having seen it once, but isn't there stuff stacked up against such windows as it possesses?
Well, there's a certain amount. I'm cramped for space, really. I ought to have a bigger premises.
And what's the artificial lighting?
Artificial light? Well, it's adequate.
And half a dozen light bulbs? 3?
Well, 2. Yes, actually, 2. But they're 200 watts.
And these were burning that morning?
Well, I imagine so.
You imagine so?
Well, I mean, they would have been burning, wouldn't they, naturally?
Well, no daylight to speak of then, and something approaching primeval gloom in your shop.
Primeval gloom in my shop? Well,
yes. Now, how exactly was the 20 minutes Mrs. Archer was allegedly in the shop with you used up, Mr. Pirbright?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, you've told us that you had no trouble in spotting the vase for what it was, even in that shocking light, that you offered her £150 for it, which she snapped up. Now, how long did all that take?
Well,
20 minutes? Surely not.
Well, no, obviously not as long as that. No, I think only about 5 minutes.
Yes, most of which you would, in fact, have spent examining the vase rather than the caller, wouldn't you?
Well, you look at...
So that even of that 5 minutes, you could only have been directly regarding the woman who called herself Kate Greer for how long? A minute or a minute and a half?
Well, this is all really very difficult to say.
Yes, I'm sorry to have to be so niggling, Mr. Pirbright, but here's something that shouldn't be quite so difficult to say. What happened to the rest of the 20 minutes?
Well, what do you mean, what happened?
Well, if the business only took 5 minutes or so, what were you doing for the rest of the time that Kate Greer was in your emporium? Were you writing letters or tidying up? What?
No, I would, during that time, I would be getting the money from the safe, I suppose, the 150.
Ah, the safe. Now, where is that kept? In another part of the shop?
Well, it's in the living quarters, actually, upstairs.
Oh, not in the shop at all?
No.
Well, this is most interesting. So for perhaps 15 of the 20 minutes the whole transaction occupied, you weren't even face-to-face with your caller at all?
No, look here. I saw quite enough of that woman in my shop that day to be able to identify her later on. Let's have no nonsense about that. Well, when I came back with the money, I would have to ask her a name and address and put it in the book. Well, all that would take a little while more.
A little while more that you must have been looking in the book since you were writing in it.
Look, the woman who sold me that vase that day is the accused there, Winifred Archer.
Mr. Pirbright, In late April, did 2 members of the Fulchester University Students' Union visit you?
Yes, they did, but I don't want to talk about that.
Well, I'm very much afraid you'll have to talk about it, Mr. Pirbright. All this is extremely relevant. Now, these members of the Students' Union showed you a photograph of Mrs. Winifred Archer, did they not?
Yes, they did.
Now, did they also perhaps suggest to you that this was the woman who sold you the vase on the 5th of December?
No, they didn't do that. They simply told me that a young woman was in prison for the theft of a vase. And then they asked me if I could identify Mrs. Archer as the woman who came into my shop. Well, I said yes at once.
At once?
Well, yes, at once. It was obvious. It was the woman who had called herself Kate Greer.
You were absolutely certain. There was no doubt in your mind whatsoever.
But it was all exactly as I recalled it, my lord. The same face, the same features, the same ashy blonde hair.
Ah, yes, of course. You place great store by that ash blonde hair, don't you?
I don't know what you mean,
Well,
sir.
the association is automatically middle age. Ash blonde is the name given to the colouring of a woman who was once fair and is now going grey. I notice that you wear 2 pairs of spectacles, Mr. Pirbright.
Well, yes, I do. Is it important?
Oh, no, it's interesting. One for distance and one for close work, presumably.
Yes.
Your sight is, in fact, pretty bad, is it?
Look, there's nothing the matter with my sight. It's just that I'm not quite as young as I used to be. I need a little help, that's all.
Yes, of course, Mr. Pirbright. And what glasses did you have on when Kate Greer entered your shop on December the 5th?
Dear me, good heavens, how am I expected to recall that? Well, I suppose I'd have me distance glasses on. It would be the usual thing.
The usual thing. But what were you doing when Kate Greer entered? Can you recall that?
Well, let's see, it was early in the morning. Nothing much had happened. Yes, that's right, I remember. I was doing my Yes, I was doing my ledger. It all comes back to me.
Your ledger? Then you'd surely have been wearing your reading glasses, wouldn't you?
Well, yes. But it doesn't make any difference. I may have been wearing my reading glasses through the whole interview. I don't know. But as I say, I can see these things at a distance quite clearly enough.
I see, Mr. Pirbright. Now, could you look at this document, please?
Well, I don't understand this. It just seems to be a clipping from a newspaper.
Yes, I apologise, Mr. Pirbright. The document was simply a ruse to get you to change your glasses. Now, if you wouldn't mind looking this
My
way...
lord, I really must protest.
No, Mr. Lloyd. We must let Mr. Logan get on with it.
I assure you, my lord, that I'm merely trying to carry out my duty to my client. Now, Mr. Pirbright, who is this standing beside me, please? No, don't change your glasses again. Now, just tell me what you see.
Why, there's a woman standing beside you.
Yes, but a young woman or an old woman? Can you tell the court?
It's a woman with ash blonde hair.
Ah, now, would you look towards the dock, please? Over here. Now, is this the accused, Winifred Archer? Or have I asked her to come down and stand by me and place someone else in the dock? Can you tell for certain?
Well, I think it's still the accused in the dock. Yes, but no, I can't say for certain.
I see, Mr. Pirbright. Thank you, that is all.
Yes, it is the same.
The case of the Queen against Archer will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.